Looks like we're live. Good morning, everyone. Good morning from California. Both myself and Shah are from California, so it's nice to, be on a stream from someone with the same time zone because I'm usually on a stream with people on the East Coast, Nova Dasher. But no, um, yeah, it's nice to be on the same time zone, and it's a lot easier to schedule for sure. But yeah, we're just gonna wait a little bit for for YouTube notifications to go out. Because YouTube, if you're a creator, you know that YouTube lags when it comes to notifications. Like yesterday, I was doing a stream with my friend Carlos. People start coming in like half an hour later, and we're about to end the stream. So, we decided to go a little bit earlier than 11:30 and let YouTube notifications go out. Let everyone jump in and enjoy the stream. But yeah, me and Shaw, before we went live, we were talking about Amazon Prime Day. I don't know if anyone from the audience ordered anything, but if you did, let us know. There we go. People are starting to pile in. Nice. We got Intel Wild in the house. Salute Intel Wild. We got Juliana or Juliana in the house. What's going on? She says, "What's good?" But yeah, because it's good to see notifications going out.
Perfect. Yep. That means it hopefully went out on time.
Juliana says, "Listen to you while at the gym." Nice. Get that workout and get that sweat in. And I believe she's in your neck of the woods, Shaw.
Oh, really? Up near Sacramento?
Mm-hmm.
I better be careful then. Juliana finds me. I better not say anything too crazy here today.
Yeah, right. No, Juliana, she's one of my biggest supporters. She's always here at the stream, so she's good. I mean, everyone here is good people, so I really enjoy interacting with everyone.
Heck yeah! Well, I appreciate you having me on, and definitely been looking forward to this for the whole last week. Yesterday was Friday, and I was like, all right, Saturday's coming. I put my alarm on. Make sure we're ready.
You just mark it on your calendar.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Is it hot over there, over on your part of California?
You know what? It's actually going to be 109 degrees today.
Wow.
Check my weather again. Yeah. Well, looks like the top today is 108, and tomorrow's going to be 108. So we're going through a heat wave. And man, in the valley, in the Bay Area, it's always nice, but in the valley, man, it gets super hot over here. So I got my watermelon in the fridge, and
there you go.
Once it gets tough, I'm cutting that baby open, and nothing's better than a nice, juicy, sweet watermelon on a hot day.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, I'm in LA, so I'm in Southern California, but I live in the area where we call it the Valley. But yeah, it's about 100 degrees here too, so
okay,
not too far from you. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
If I was in Santa Monica, if I was like near the beach, I would have been so much better. But it's practically a desert, so it's hot as hell here.
Oh my god, yeah, man. Over here in NorCal, we got like the Bay Area, which is like San Francisco and all those places, and weather is just so much better over there than the Valley. And I always like wished I lived in the Bay Area, but then when I go out to the Bay Area, I'm like, I'm happy enough to come back to Sac, to a smaller city, and a little slower over here. So, but yeah, on a day like this, I would not mind being out of town. So,
where would you go if you were to go out of town?
I would go right now. If I was to go out of town, I'd go to Monterey, like Big Sur area. I love it there. I love the hiking, just very beautiful, and just the ocean's nice. It's cold water over here in California, but I got a lot of like friends and some family over there, so I'm kind of lucky. If I go down to Monterey, I have a place to stay, and
there you go.
It's just very scenic and nice. But that's where I would go. My last excursion was Half Moon Bay for a friend's bachelor party.
I was about to ask, how close are you to Half Moon Bay?
Yeah, it was how long of a drive was it? I'd say it was just shy of 2 hours.
Okay.
We went there. It was really beautiful. We got this Airbnb. My buddy's getting married actually in Bali, and I couldn't go on the trip because the ticket was like $3,000, and I'm like, man, I love you, bro, but I'm sorry. So we threw him a bachelor party over here in Half Moon Bay, and we got this beach house, and it was really nice. It was my first time spending time there. I mean, I've driven through it before, but I've never actually got to hang out. So
yeah, I've never been to Half Moon Bay, but I've heard really good things about it. It's on my list for sure.
Yeah. I want to go up north and check out like Mount Shasta area. I don't know if you've ever been there. I never have, but I've been reading a lot of like spooky stories about Mount Shasta. I'm kind of like, I know this is one of the topics, but just before we get started, I'm like super big into like the UAP aliens and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So I follow those forums, and someone was posting like they were hiking in Mount Shasta, and they're like, saw an entity. And I was every night before I go to sleep, like one of the things I do is I just read paranormal stuff, and I was like really scaring myself, and I was like, ooh man, I'm scared of Mount Shasta now, but now I gotta go. You know what I mean? So
Right.
it'd be nice to hit some hiking trails up there.
We actually have an area here in LA. It's called Gravity Hill. I don't know if you've ever heard of it, but
Never heard of it. That's
basically if you park like at a certain part of the mountain at night and you put your car in neutral, you can feel your car float. That's a rumor.
Really? Okay, I was thinking
Yeah.
like, well, okay, so it's like a phenomena, but it's not like an established scientific fact, but it's something people report then.
Yeah, you can't prove it, but like everyone who goes up there, that's what they report.
Well, it must happen enough for them to be calling it Gravity Hill. So
No, this is aliens.
exactly. There's going to be a hearing in Congress. I think July 26th.
Oh, really?
They're going to be hearing out the David Grush, who was that most recent whistleblower, and so I'm super excited for that. I'm totally biased that aliens exist, and I'm all for that. But yeah. So we'll see how that goes. Hopefully, we get some fun disclosures coming soon.
Okay, so actually, I guess I was a little bit wrong. It says Gravity Hill is a place, or it says researchers. I don't know who these researchers are, but apparently they're out there. It says that say gravity hills are just an optical illusion. Depending on the area landscape, a small downhill slope may appear to be going uphill. Cars can be seen rolling uphill against the gradient of the road.
I see. Okay, so people maybe who are behind them and they're following them, they see this weird like optical illusion kind of thing.
Maybe, yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I really, need to spend more time in SoCal. I've been to like Newport Beach. I've been to San Diego.
Right.
I've gone to LA a couple times, but it's a place I wish I had more familiarity with. I think I stayed in Irvine. I just need to fly down there. I'm so like, I do not like doing that drive. I mean, it's not terrible, but
yeah, it's half a day commitment for sure.
yeah, but soon, hopefully, I'll have some reason to come down there. I'm one of those guys. I have such a hard time like just enjoying myself for the sake of it. Like, I always need a reason to be somewhere, which right. I hate. And it's nice that like I'm into photography now, because now it's like if I want to go somewhere, I'm gonna go take pictures.
It gives you an excuse.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, if you come down here, LA, definitely let me know. We'll grab a beer. We'll hang out.
Oh yeah, I'd love that. That sounds amazing, actually. So
Nova says aliens definitely exist. Yep.
Well, yeah, I'm on Nova's side there. So
Team aliens. All right, let's get started. So yeah, today I'm joined by someone that I've been following for quite some time now. I actually mentioned some of his earlier videos, and he was surprised that I've been following for that long. But the thing that me and Shah we share, we both see a lot of things similarly, but we also have our differences. Based on personality, we both have a Middle Eastern background. My parents are from Lebanon, and then Shah's family, I believe, they're from Pakistan. So like whenever you react to that Persian model video and you're like, oh, let me put my Pakistani hat on and like this is what we do. I'm like, dude, like that sounds like exactly what my family would do in Lebanon. So yeah, it's kind of cool to connect with someone that we have like the same or very similar views, and also different at the same time. But yeah, I mean that's there's not enough words where I can use to introduce you, but why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself to everyone, Shah?
Well, this is Shah. Okay, sorry, I had to do that. My name is Shah, and I've been on YouTube streaming for a few years now. I got, still a small channel and everything. I'd say what's significant about me, I was born in France, grew up in California. So I'm very, kind of clued in with the culture here, even though my parents are from Pakistan. So I was raised with that background. But one thing that I kind of talk about a lot on my channel, in terms of like dating and family law and all that kind of stuff, is I worked as a child support officer for 5 years. So every county has its local child support agency, and I was basically that guy who was doing like genetic testing on guys, and it was my job to find people, sue them, and get a child support order against them. So I'm familiar with the child support program as it works in California and also nationally, because we had to work with many different states. And I started there when I was 25. I was a young, fresh-faced gentleman, and I did not have any clue how the system worked. But as I started working there, there were some things about the system that actually really surprised me, and a lot of guys don't know. So, on my channel, I like to make shorts like child support tips. Sometimes I make videos about child support. I plan on making more of them into the future as I make more, edutainment style videos about them. But there's a lot of things, guys, a lot of stuff guys don't know about how the law works. There's a lot of confusion out there, a lot of frustration. So, I enjoy talking about that. And John and I were kind of talking about this, and we just thought it was a good idea. We can share some of that with you guys, as well as talk about a lot of the other big topics, in the manosphere, on YouTube, and all that kind of stuff. So that's me. If you see anything to the left, it's because that's where the screen is, and then my is right here. So I'll try to make it less awkward.
No, it's okay. I actually watch a lot of streams where it's like that, where the screen will be in one place, but the camera will be just right so they can get the backdropping on the camera. So you're good. But yeah, you mentioned. I guess that's a good way to start the conversation. You mentioned, you work in child support, and one of the things that we've talked about and we've seen online is a lot of young men that are in their 20s and 30s, even in their 40s. They're saying, you know what? Screw this. I don't want to be on dating apps anymore. I don't want to date. I'm just gonna kind of do my own thing and fall off the face of the earth, if you will. But do you think that has a lot to do with maybe they've had a bad experience, maybe they had a child out of wedlock, or maybe they got married and divorced, and they don't really understand child support law?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of how that begins is a lot of guys, especially, have gone through bad experiences. And, I've talked to so many different people because they've had to sit across the table for me. And I've read so many divorce orders because we would use their judgments to file in with child support if it wasn't there, or modify it. And I've seen what happened with these guys. I talked to them, and there are some aspects, which I'll get into later, of the system that I think are not right. There's a whole history here that I really want people to know. But I think it starts with a lot of guys having these bad experiences, going through really rough divorces, getting cheated on, having to take care of kids that aren't theirs, biologically. And what happens is a lot of younger guys kind of saw what happened to the generation before that, right? Because like a lot of kids are growing up now and they saw their parents get divorced, So you got guys who were married, had a bad experience, don't want to do it. But then you also got guys watching what happened to those guys, and they're like, hold on a second, this isn't something I want to jump into. It just seems like a bad deal for me as a guy. And they're starting to think about this, and you can see in the stats, a lot of marriages ending in divorces, close to half. A lot of children being born out of wedlock now. It's about 44% in the U.S., where in the 1950s it was around 3 to 5%. So you've seen this increase and what wasn't traditionally there. And there are many reasons for these changes, but it's all kind of led into this kind of tornado of issues which really affect men, and it's tough out there. So.
Yeah, definitely. I guess dating apps kind of goes hand in hand with this. I don't know if you used dating apps in the past, but I have in the past, and I would say it's very difficult for the average man to become successful in the dating apps, and we're getting to a point in society where everyone's on their phone. Not many people are going on and talking to people. So, one of the big things that men have to do is they have to go out and, not necessarily cold approach, but they have to go out, put themselves out there and, risk rejection, which happens, more often than not. Do you think that a lot of, or one of the main reasons why a lot of men are starting to use or stopping to use dating apps is because they're not having much success with it?
Oh, for sure. I mean, and even for me, I use Hinge. I got Tinder right now. I got Facebook dating, and I'll swipe and stuff. And the thing was, for me, I'm kind of different in the sense that I didn't actually start dating in my life until I was 30, just like 3.5 years ago, or a little bit before that. And that was my first introduction to the apps. And man, there was a lot of nothing for a while. It's a process of refinement. And also, the cards are stacked against you. I mean, those apps are designed in order to get you to pay for the apps, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like the balance between men and women is very skewed. It's almost like trying to get into a club, and there's going to be a huge line of guys, but obviously the ladies are letting for free, this or that. And I'm not making this like a man-woman thing, but what I'm saying is the way those algorithms work. It's really tough. A lot of the ladies will get like a lot of matches, some guys won't get any. It gets really frustrating. There is a lot of rejection. I mean, I have had so many experiences on dating apps, especially at first, where I'd take like a lot of things to heart, or I'd be really, disappointed about it, or met with rejection. And it's just a slow, grueling process of trying, okay, this didn't work this time. I'm going to do this now. I'm going to see how this works. And just slowly getting better and better at it. But it's like with social media, with dating apps, it has really changed the way that the landscape works. I mean, and it's changed the whole kind of dating marketplace because it's been streamlined with these new technologies from your phone. And it's really made it hard, I think, to even cultivate a long lasting relationship because people have so many options. There's so many things that can be going on in the background. I guess personally, it's like, I wouldn't say I've had like a lot of success on there, but I've at least been able to get dates. I've been with some women, this and that. And so it's nice to be able to see kind of like what it took for me. And I know the challenge is different for a lot of guys, but there was a lot of different things I had to do. Even how I talk to women had to get better, and I had to be smarter at that, where before I was definitely very naive, and I paid the price for that. Like I've gotten stabbed in the back by ladies, and luckily I was able to
literally or figuratively.
Might as well, yeah, figuratively. But here's the thing: like I didn't really start dating till 30, and I started working at child support at 20, like the tail end of my 25th year, and I was still not dating. But what was happening is like I was watching the guys who were getting the chicks when I never was, and I was seeing what was happening to them and what traps were the landmines that were laid out there that were getting these guys now as we're getting older, So it's like sometimes I'd come home from work and I just got done seeing a guy paying like, $2,500 in spousal support and another $1,200 in child support, and I'd be like, you know what? I think I'm just going to play Assassin's Creed Odyssey and at least I'll have those problems. You know what I mean? So it's like so with that background in mind, I mean, I was able to get that knowledge where a lot of guys don't have that because, I mean, unless you work there, it's hard to know. It's a very complex system. I'm like, all right, things went badly between me and this chick, but you know what? There's no legal problems. I don't have a kid with her. I could just nurse my broken heart and get back into the game. And after that, having enough time, you definitely do develop a thicker skin, So I got a lot of nightmare dating stories. We can talk about that sometime. So
yeah, we'll definitely have to talk about that for sure. One of the things that I've when I was on dating apps back in the day in my 20s, I mean, like you said, it's its own whole role. Like you need. Or one of the things that I've learned is that you need really good photos, like almost to the point where like a professional photographer took it. Because I was like looking at profiles of people that are really successful, and like a lot of them are like they're taking a picture like in a social setting, like they're on a yacht or something, or with they're with their friends, or they're standing next to like a really really expensive car. So you're run of the mill, like, oh, I'm gonna take a picture in a bathroom real quick. Those pictures are gonna work, at least for men. So there's definitely an art to it.
There's a huge selling your marketing yourself aspect. I mean, when I first started, I kind of had cell phone pictures, and it was very little luck. I then, I'm into photography. I'm into cameras and stuff like that. I love all that stuff. So I was able to get some nicer photos of myself, and I started seeing at least some matches. But for the most part, that's still with hundreds and hundreds of swipes, and even with a really done up profile, like. I'm not like that. I'm 5'9". I'm not 6'2" or 6'3". You know what I mean? I'm not super built or something. So certain guys can make it work for them. But for most normal guys, it requires a lot more. And it can be super frustrating. Like if, a lot of times, like maybe the algorithm, like there's so many guys on there, if the chick swipe and like she might not even see your profile to swipe on it one way or the other, right? Because how long are they typically on there if they're already getting so many matches in the first place? It can become overwhelming for them. So, and that's how Tinder and these other apps will try to get you to pay to put you in front of the line to see that. And it's definitely really annoying, but you got to try to work with whatever the environment is for that. What I tend to think for myself is like if something's not working, I have to try my best to change something or try something new. Like my buddy told me this. He's like, be brand new, like recreate yourself. And it's always a great opportunity to see, all right, how does this do? You know what I mean? Whether it's even a haircut, the way that you're approaching people, the way you're talking to them. And it's just like I'm a lot better at dating apps now. I'm still not good at approaching like cold approach or something in daytime. So it's like, or night, whatever, but it not digitally. And it's still a challenge for me. So it's a constant process of refinement over here.
Yeah, actually, I'm actually the opposite. I'm not gonna say like I'm a pickup artist or like I'm the best cold approacher, but working in sales pretty much my entire life, I've gotten used to going up to random people and talking to them. So like
Yeah.
I'll like crack a joke or something, to break the ice or like to not make it awkward. But yeah, like over the years, I've like you said, like women. I think men forget that women get so many matches, like to the point where like we won't believe it unless we like look at their phones and all
Yeah.
the messages that they get overwhelmed with messages. And I realized that the game is won like when they're swiping. You got to win with the pictures and the profile. Like if you're trying to win her over in the messages, that's going to be an uphill battle. So that's really difficult. I guess like one of the other things that I was going to ask you is that do you think that because I know a lot of men who have stopped using dating apps or have just stopped dating in general. Do you think that there's like some fear that maybe the girl that they go on a date with and sleep with, they might try to baby trap them because we've seen it happen to NBA players and obviously like the average male earner is not as wealthy as the NBA player, but do you think that just the fear of like, hey, like what if I accidentally knock this chick up or she puts me in a situation where she's gonna have a baby? Do you think that a lot of men are like, no, what, no thanks, I'll pass? Do you think that's something to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, and that's something I can really speak to because I mean I've seen what happened, the consequences of the baby trap, and I've seen court cases too where this happened. It's the NBA player are like an extreme case of it, and but this does happen to normal guys too. Like if you're a normal guy and you have a decent job, and maybe you're with somebody and who knows, like maybe she's like hitting 30 and she's like, nothing's really going on. I need to lock someone down. I mean, that is something that they might consider in order to secure some kind of investment from you. Like okay, it's just funny. I have this NBA case player in my mind. I can't say the name or anything, but so when I first started at child support, they took us across the street here in Sacramento, right across from the agency. The family courts are actually right over there. And we watched the proceedings. We watched orders get made. We've seen how it happens for the public. And then afterwards, the commissioner, it's the commissioner who makes the orders. There's judges and commissioners. But he's like, he saw us watching. He knew we were the new trainees or whatever. And he's like, he came down to talk with us, after everybody else had filed out and court wasn't in session anymore. And he told me specifically, I mean, this is the freaking commissioner over here telling me about a case that he worked on where there was an NBA player and the NBA player had, I guess what you could say is a one-night stand with the woman, in a hotel or whatever. And she brought a case to saying, he was the alleged father. And what happened was he was like, there's no way, I want a genetic test. They do the genetic test and the genetic test came back that he was the father.
Wow.
And he was like, that's impossible. I used a condom. There's no way I could be the dad. And the commissioner was like, well, what did you do with the condom? After you guys had sex. And then he was like, I threw it in the trash. And then so it basically came out in court that she, took out the condom and impregnated herself with it, right? So tip number 1, flush that down the toilet if you're not sure. Anyways, and, he got baby trapped, right? So he's in a different state. It's very hard for him to have a relationship with this kid. He's probably going to have 0% custody. He's going to be paying the max child support to this random person that he doesn't even know. And, is there any criminal actions for mom for that? Absolutely not. And it's like, well, first of all, there aren't any laws for that in the first place, but the state isn't going to put her in jail, or they don't want another mouth to feed that welfare has to take care of. It's easier for them, the path of least resistance, to be like, hey, you're the dad, pay for this, regardless of how all that stuff happens. So there's all these gaps in the law that lead to these situations that men can find themselves into. And I mean, this happens with normal guys. I mean, if someone's a software engineer, or you don't have to be an NBA player for this,
Mm-hmm.
It's just things that happen. And even if you're not making that much money, maybe the chick really likes you or something. These things do happen. Sometimes people do act irrationally. Like I've had women, I usually I worked at the freaking child support office, so I have condoms in my wallet. And I have had more than one woman who has wanted to have sex unprotected, and I'll sit there and have the conversation with them, and I'm like, so okay, are you on birth control? And they'll be like, no. And I'm like, well, okay, so what's the plan if you do get pregnant? And they'll, and some will be like, oh, I'll get an abortion. Or I had other people tell me, like, there's no way I'll kill my child. But the thing is whatever they say, if you do that, when they're pregnant, they might then change their mind and be like, you know what? I don't want to go through the abortion. I don't want to do this, or I thought my birth control failed, or whatever it is. So you're kind of avoiding landmines out here in some sense, John, if you don't mind, I think this is kind of a good way for me to kind of do some education on the paternity laws here.
Yeah, please do.
It's one thing to get trapped with the baby because, the mom wants to have your kid and get the child support order from you. It's another thing when you get trapped in a situation where the kid's not even yours and you have to pay child support for 18 years. And so one of my biggest axe to grind here with the law is that, federally speaking, and this is in what's called the Uniform Parentage Act. Basically, it limits the ability for someone to be able to bring a challenge to paternity once the child is 2 years old. So you can establish paternity if the kid's over 2. So that means the kid never had a legal parent. The kid's still a minor, and they want to find out who dad is. But if the kid already has a parent, like if you're already legally the father of the child from before they turn 2, and then after they turn 2, 3, you find out that child isn't yours, there's absolutely nothing you can do about it, except if that other guy came out of the woodwork and you guys facilitated an adoption kind of thing. You know what I mean? Which 99.999% of the time is not going to happen. So what'll happen is, someone might be married. If you guys have a kid within the marriage, there's a legal term. It's called presumption of marriage, which means that you are presumed to be the father of this child, regardless of DNA or anything of that, right? So, if your average marriage lasts 3 to 5 years and the kid's already 3 by the time you're going through the divorce paperwork, maybe it's a heated divorce and mom's like, hey, I cheated on you, never loved you, all the mean words come out. You do your private genetic test and you're like, this kid is not mine. And you go to court and you're like, hey, this isn't my child. The court's going to be like, hey, you're still on the hook because the kid knows you as dad. You can't file a challenge to this since the kid's over 2, and then that's it. You know what I mean? What I want to do is change that, but we're a far way from.
Sorry to cut you off. I'm just gonna hop in real quick, and before we move on to the next point, I want to ask why do you think that is? Why do you think the courts are so quick to appoint men? Is it because they don't want the children to become liable to the government, or?
Well, so I'll try to explain it as best as I understand it. And from what I've read, I don't want to be too verbose, but basically child support was originally created as a reaction to the welfare system, right? So if I'm gonna give you a brief history, at the end of World War II, you had a lot of widows with kids, right? And they couldn't take care of the kids because, back then, especially, women didn't work and have the same income potential the same way as they do now. Mm-hmm. So they expanded Social Security and they created what is going to be the welfare program we have now. And this was in after World War II, kids born out of wedlock were about 3 to 5%. I said that earlier. By the time you get to the 1970s, what they notice is that this welfare caseload has ballooned and that the demographics are different. They notice now that most of the people receiving welfare are actually not widows with kids. They're actually single mothers where the father's still alive, right? So the nation had this problem of these ballooning births out of wedlock. They're just going to live on welfare. You had this concept of what was called the welfare queen. That was one of those buzzwords thrown around back then. And then that gave rise to another buzzword, which was the deadbeat dad. So in the mid-70s, you had Congress come together and actually create this formal program of child support. And it was originally intended to go for anybody who was on cash aid, that was a single parent on cash aid, would automatically trigger the child support agency to then go after whoever they thought dad was so that they can recoup the tax dollars, right? So the state has this interest in recouping the tax dollars. What they're going to tell you, and what could be, also part of the reason is they're going to say, well, it's in the best interest of the child. If there's no other stand-in father figure, they're going to say the kid's over 2, And I used to ask this question when I worked at child support. I was like, well, why is it 2 years old? You know, it doesn't make sense. What the legal team would tell me was that at age 2, the kid's starting to form memories and they're starting to know so-and-so is dad. Like, this person has held himself out as the father. So what that means is it's in the best interest of the child to keep this person as the dad, right? So, and notice the language, the best interest of the child, not the best interest of your child, right? I mean, they're going to say it's your child legally, but I mean, like, biologically. And that's what it was. So, you know, it's kind of it's simple to say that, but it is rooted in that legal framework and for those reasons. And so that's what the state is looking at, because it doesn't want another mouth to feed, you know, on the system, on the tax dollars, right? And it also brings up another debate of sort of collective responsibility for taking care of kids and individual responsibility. You know, one way we can do this is if, there's welfare system and everybody pays taxes into it, whether it's your kid or not, right? And sort of collectively, we all take care of these kids by providing money. What was kind of popular back then, you know, obviously people were getting annoyed by how much money was getting expended on the welfare system. They wanted what was called welfare reform. You know, conservatives and Democrats alike too. They basically went for, well, it's the individual's responsibility, so let's go after the deadbeat dads, you know. And it's kind of ballooned into this, what I think is an incredibly powerful system, a very oppressive system, invasive system. I hate to use those words, but the system, it hasn't exactly solved the problems it set out to solve. I mean, I think you can say it's even kind of become worse at this point. And it's about individual responsibility, but it's not always about the right individual. Like, they don't care if it's, you know, they have no vested interest to figure out who's really the dad. If you end up the dad and you want to argue about this later, they're going to be like, we don't want a kid out here in the cold. Too bad, it's you. But what I think should happen is that they should let someone challenge paternity. They should put it on the other person who cheated or didn't hold up her end of the deal to then go find who it really was. You know what I mean? And then make them pay, you know, at the very least. But we don't have that now. And to me, it's a problem. So that's definitely like one of my biggest axes to grind with the system. And it's the thing that I think that your viewers and most young men need to know about, because they're not really versed about these laws and how it will affect them. So when you're making these big decisions with women, when you're taking these risks, you have to know, what net am I going to get caught in if I do this, you know? So.
Yeah, thanks for going into all that detail. Just every time we talk, I learn something new, especially about child support. So
yeah, there's a lot.
It's a very important topic.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and that's the thing. I mean, I think when people hear child support, I mean, it sounds boring. It sounds very like matter of fact. To some people, it's almost like a given. Like, of course, you should take care of your child. But the problem is like we have this system that's like, just imagine like a giant like tractor just scooping up as much dirt as possible and moving it over here, right? And the ends of like the claws of that thing, it's just crushing some guys that just accidentally got hit there. You know what I mean? And it's this kind of happy meal solution to what was a complex problem. So I guess to kind of describe it better, you know, family law used to be something that was what was done like privately. You know, obviously it's done at the courts, but it's kind of like you hire a private family law attorney. You go to the courts. The courts had the dexterity. They had the ability to look at a very case-by-case basis and be like, this is what's appropriate for this case. This is what's appropriate for that case. But what happened was you had all these ballooning single kids being born out of wedlock. It was becoming a problem that was affecting society. So what happened is Congress created our first ever public family law system that just kind of is designed in order to help sort of these people that were at the bottom of the ladder here. And the system got so powerful, it encroaches on what originally was private family law. And now that's how you end up with cases where people, maybe like, you know, normal families that are middle class, upper middle class, actually end up kind of becoming prey to these laws that were kind of designed for folks at the bottom of the ladder in order to sort of just scoop up and solve a problem. You know what I mean? And I think it's affected relationships and marriage in a way to where the contract of marriage isn't really seeming worth it. This goes back to your initial point of why some guys are checking out. And it's kind of seeming like a raw deal for guys, you know, and there's going to be people that are going to be ostriches and put their head under their sand and say, no, everything's fine, but it really isn't, you know, and the statistics are kind of showing us that, you know. So we're seeing these changes, and there's definitely a lot to unpack there. My solution, like I see what I see as far as advice for the manosphere. I see things like Andrew Tate, or kind of his philosophy of like becoming I don't know if that's his philosophy. Those Kevin Samuels, all these guys, becoming a high value man. Like, hey, be super successful, get the Bugatti or the Porsche or whatever. It doesn't have to be the Bugatti, and that's how you're going to get the chicks. But even if you're 6'5", you're freaking jacked, you got the Porsche, it's still not going to actually help you with these very real legal problems. And I see a lot of frustration out there. I see what I would consider misplaced energy. And my goal and my hope is to kind of concentrate all this and say, hey, these are the laws you need to zero in on. And this is what we need to be asking Congress, asking our politicians and lobbying to get changed, because that's what's going to actually make it so guys want to participate in this system again, and also women too. Like, this will actually help women in their own way as women become, higher earners, right? Like they're now in the workplace. They make
right on topic.
Yeah, Juliana's. Yeah, exactly. She's on topic, and you see from women typically don't want to get into a relationship with guys that like, as far as marriages are concerned, with someone that makes less money than them. Right. And it's like, if the laws weren't so oppressive, like. Typically it's guys paying child support, but as I was working there, we were seeing an uptrend in women paying child support. You know what I mean? You might see like a nice nurse, she makes 10 to 15K a month. All of a sudden she's paying spousals and child support. So as women enter the workforce, they make more money. I think reform in these laws will actually help out both men and women, and it'll actually make marriage more palatable to both parties, right? And then I think that will actually set us on a better path than what we have now, which is just what I think is completely barreling, to the ground, like destruction, right? No relationships aren't really working, or there's sort of a bunch of situationships going on. People don't want to tie the knot, or they want to wait until they're 30 or 32 or 35 to maybe get married for the first time instead of in their early 20s or something like that. Divorces are really nasty. It's a little bit too much, you know what I mean? And I think it could be tapered down a bit to get people to say, hey, this is a good idea again. This is something I want to do. But yeah, women definitely can pay child support. They were some of the toughest clients to deal with. A lot of guys would be like, all right, well, they kind of, they're resigned, where women are like, excuse me? My child? And I'm like, yeah. They'd want to freaking tear my head off. But
you just, you can only do whatever the law says, you got to follow it.
Yeah. And I'm sorry, go on.
No, it's okay. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, financially, men and women are beholden to the same laws, right? Typically, men won't care about how much a woman is making. What you'll see, I guess, culturally is men will get with women that are making way less. You know what I mean? But now, you do see some people that are making about the same, or even sometimes the women making more. So I think as the future goes on, it's something you might see more of, but where women, in my opinion, will hold more of an advantage isn't in the financial aspect so much. It's in paternity, right? I think paternity is something that means more to men. Obviously, with women, we don't need all these different genetic tests and stuff to know who the mom is. I think we got that part figured out. For guys, it's different, and there can be a lot of foul play. Paternity fraud is a big thing, and how often it happens, or this or that. I've seen it happen plenty of times. Obviously, I work at the place, but it's something that guys hear about. They become nightmare stories, and it's just yet another thing that will push men away from wanting to get married. You know what I mean? So I just think it's something to be looked at. And I'm not even asking specifically for courts to say, hey, you're out in the cold, but I do want the courts to at least have the dexterity to be able to look at a situation. Like, okay, let me tell you about another case. So back when I had become a lead at this point on our modification team, but one of my coworkers was working a case right on the cubicle next to me, and I heard him on the phone, and basically he was in, I think it was the advanced collections team or something. But for guys who really don't want to pay, we have like a specific team that would try to contact those guys and give them pay. Right. He had been married to someone, and they had, I think it was 3 kids. It was 2 or 3 kids. I think it was 3. And they were married, things were fine, and then they got divorced. Okay. They got divorced. He's put on child support. What he found out through the divorce were that those kids weren't his, and she had actually been sleeping with an ex-boyfriend the whole time. Okay. So the kids he was not bio dad. He was just legal dad because of marriage presumption. They get divorced. She goes and lives with the ex-boyfriend. They end up shacking up, and those kids are actually his. But what ends up happening is this guy is like, no, I don't want to pay for these kids because they're living together and I'm sitting here just paying for these kids and they're all living in a happy home together and they're not even my kids. But as it goes now, I mean, like, unless that guy wants to adopt them, very low likelihood. Why would they give up this free money if they're getting it from this guy? Or, it's not something I've ever seen before. But if he brings that to court, the court's not even going to look at it and in here, they're just going to be like, are these kids over too? No one wants to, that's it. It's just
tough luck.
Yeah, tough luck. Or if that law isn't there, at least the court can be like, all right, what the heck's going on? Maybe they can have the power to make a better decision, And this is only going to be better for everybody. It'll be better for men. I mean, there's a lot of domestic violence and things that happen out there because guys lose their freaking minds in situations like this. I remember when I was a kid, sometimes I'd see a story like where the guy goes and does some not so nice things to the whole family. And I'm like, Mom, why'd that happen? And their mom was just like, well, that's because they're crazy. They're crazy people. And I'm like, all right, they're crazy. And then as I started working at child support, I'm like, oh, that's how that happened. You know what I mean? So, I guess, like, I'm not saying that's right. I'm just saying that, like, when people feel trapped and in this impossible place, that anger either gets taken out on someone else or themselves. And that's where you start seeing the taking themselves out rate going high. You know what I mean? From where it used to be. So these are problems that I see. And I mean, as a guy that myself, like these are things I'm watching out for. These are things I'd see guys get stuck in all the time. So.
Yeah, definitely. One of the things, I guess, we could switch gears a little bit.
Sure.
Dating apps, child support. You mentioned High Value Man, which is something that, I'm familiar with. I used to watch, rest in peace, Kevin Samuels. And the man, what's what used to be called the manosphere, but is now referred to as the manoswamp because, everyone just kind of like argues with each other. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Everyone just kind of like argues with each other and it kind of defeats the purpose of why it was created in the first place, which is, it was basically like older, more experienced men giving advice, like kind of like a father figure to younger men on how they can make it. With dating apps, combination of dating apps, child support, the manosphere, like you said, a lot of men it's affecting their mental health because they feel like the cards are stacked against them. And, in terms of like being a high value man, from what I understand is, you got to be, or they refer to as a Henry, high earner, not rich yet. So, you got to make it six figures, maybe driving a Porsche, like you mentioned, and being really good at networking, posting yourself on yachts, on IG, on Instagram, and all these things. Do you think that a lot of men are looking at, these ideologies and these concepts and saying, hey, I'll never be good enough to be that person and women won't want me? Do you think that kind of has to do with it?
Yeah, I mean, high value man is another one of those like amorphous terms. Like people think that they know what it means. It doesn't have an exact definition, but it's kind of basically all those things you listed.
A lot of implications.
Yeah, and it's like I actually used to read like the Red Pill subreddit, and this was even before I worked at child support. Somehow I found it. I wasn't getting chicks back then, but I was reading.
Do you want to quickly explain what the red pill and the blue pill is, like in layman's terms, so audience who may not know?
So back then there was a subreddit called the Red Pill, and I remember stumbling upon that and reading it. And the Red Pill is basically just like it's like a metaphor. It's taken from the movie The Matrix, where Morpheus is like, you take the red pill, you take the blue pill, you go back to your job, whatever, your normal life, you can stay ignorant. If you take the red pill, you go down the rabbit hole and you see what they're selling as the truth, whatever, right? Mm. And basically, back then, it was like this very practical approach to like dating. It was a lot of guys sharing their divorce stories. It was a lot of guys sharing what's called field reports, where they talk about, hey, I went out today, I approached, I got a number, this didn't happen, or, whatever, this or that. And they had these concepts like, alpha fuck, beta buck, sorry, cuss. And these other things. But high value man wasn't something that was in there at the time. There were just like these alpha chads, you know what I mean? Then there were like your beta billies, and there were guys who were in what they were called the blue pill conditioning, who were, raised on sort of the Disney fantasy of saving the princess, getting married, all that stuff, being in love with one person, and then they hit a wall or something bad happened where like suddenly the divorce just comes and it just wrecks them. So then they found their way over to red pill, and that was over a decade ago. or about a decade ago, and I've been watching the sort of evolution of what would then become the manosphere, which back then, I mean, there weren't videos or YouTube stuff about it back then. It was just these forums, that hadn't really got big yet. It wasn't mainstream. Those talking points weren't. And it was just basically a bunch of guys sharing sexual strategy, I guess, to put it into one sentence. Then now what you have is you have all these like talk shows, and they're selling this idea of high value man, driven to its extreme by people like Andrew Tate, but in my opinion, it's just not practical advice for most guys. You know what I mean? Like, most guys aren't gonna, I don't think they're actually trying to solve problems. I think they're just selling this idea that sounds cool and looks good, and it doesn't actually help normal people. I think what helps normal people are the laws specifically. You know what I mean? But it's just like, you can, you definitely should be improving yourself. That's good advice. You should try to do that. But in order to get chicks, you don't have to be like this mythical high value man. You know what I mean? Like, it's just like the advice that's out there is generally like, hey, be very realpolitik about the situation, be the high value man, get all these chicks, whatever. Or it's like, hey, if everybody was just living the tradcon life, we wouldn't be in this thing. And I think they're both wrong. Like, I think the tradcons, it's not going to work because a lot of things have changed. Technology is different now. The culture is different. We need to move forward from that. And then the other guys, they're giving advice, but it's not going to work for everybody. It's still coming from a shame. It's kind of like shaming language. If you listen to any Andrew Tate video, he's just going to be like, you're lazy, you're this, you're that. You know what I mean? And it's like, oh, there's a lot of guys that work hard, but they're not, 6'4". They're not this, they're not that. And it's just different. So when I think of the concept of high value man, I think it's something that, I don't want to say it's bad, but it's something that's been focused on so much. And I think it's reached this kind of like point, this boiling point where that idea isn't actually helping to make society better. It's not helping the mass of guys. It's really just the guys at the top that are just kind of celebrating that they're the guys at the top. You know what I mean? And I think what we need, are some adjustments in the law, some things that make things more palatable to most people, instead of just saying, hey, become a high value man and then get laid. In my opinion, becoming a high value man just makes you a high value target. Like the NBA player, that guy's high value. I mean, by any stretch of the word. How did it turn out for him? You know what I mean? Like, being high value in the sense that they're selling it is not going to save you from the system once it comes after you. You know what I mean? So there are certain weaknesses there with that idea that I think can use some help, basically. Like, that's how I feel about it. And it's relatively new, that concept of high value man.
Yeah, you made some really good points there. Like, a lot of like when I first got introduced, it's funny you mentioned that because, a lot of people discovered Red Pill after like a really bad breakup. I went through a pretty bad breakup before the pandemic, and that's how I came across, the whole red pill, blue pill thing. But when I found it, it wasn't someone, or it wasn't a group of people that were trying to sell me stuff. It was more about become the best version of yourself, which is something I also preach on my channel, right? Like, I've even written this book about it, becoming the best version of yourself. And but yeah, I think a lot of those creators that I follow, they have left the man, what's referred to as the manosphere, because they're either trying to sell you a course, like you mentioned, like they're trying to help you become a pickup artist, and that's not really what it means to become a man or even a high value man. It just means that take charge in your life, like go to the gym, lift heavy shit, learn how to replace a flat tire, like be someone that men look up to, women want to be with, essentially. And I'm going to name a couple of creators that I follow because I think they give out really good advice, unlike the toxic bullshit about, oh, let me sell you my stuff. One of them is his name is Richard Cooper with Entrepreneurs in Cars. I don't know if you've come across his channel.
Yeah, I've seen his videos.
A popular one. Yeah, he's much more grounded. And then Bulldog Mindset.
I haven't seen him, but I'll have to check him out.
Yeah, they're very grounded, and they even share their own process or their progress in life, and that's something I can relate to much more. And Andrew Tate, I think he has good intentions, but like you said, like it's almost like Michael Jordan or Kobe try to become a coach. It's like they almost forget like what the average man is like, so they can't really relate. But with Andrew Tate, like some of the stuff that he says, I kind of rubs me wrong, but at the same time, I do feel like he has some good intention. I think he just goes about it the wrong way. Go ahead.
And it's not to say everything he has some good stuff, and he definitely like you listen to him, you'll get that hyped, motivated feeling. I mean, he's definitely great for that. But like there's not going to be a society where like everybody gets to be an Andrew Tate. Like if everybody, you know what I mean? Like there's that whole population
that 1%,
average people. Yeah, exactly. And then there's these 1% that get to live in Dubai and do all this stuff, you know. And he is a very, very good salesman. It's like every other word is like join Hustlers University, you know what I mean? And all that kind of stuff. But people like him, you know, especially his debates. He represents an opposite pole of masculinity that counterbalances a kind of hyper feminism that we also see in society. So his existence is there for a reason. It appeals to a lot of younger guys that are trying to figure out how do I deal with this. You know, and for like other creators, there's this guy like Better Bachelor, like he's pretty chill.
Yeah.
You know, Free Agent Lifestyle,
Joker,
my favorite. Yeah, Joker.
Coach Greg Adams. Yeah.
I like him. His advice is very practical and grounded. You know, you know, when it comes down to high value man, like I think if I had to try to define it as simply as possible, I think I would just say it kind of just means like a capable and confident man, right? Like
exactly.
A man who demonstrates capability. Men do that in different ways. Like they might demonstrate it by having a lot of muscles, or they might demonstrate it by having a really nice car or house. And it's basically saying, hey, look, I'm good at resource acquisition, or I'm able to solve problems, or this or that. And I don't think you necessarily have to have those material things in order to be recognized as having some kind of value, even high value. Like women will still be attracted to a man even if he doesn't have those things, because he demonstrates probably capability on some level. Maybe it's genetically or biologically. You know what I mean? What I'm afraid of is like in the early days of the red pill, there were guys who were naturals, or as they would call Chads back then. You would never find them reading the red pill, because why would they even bother to look? They're just out there doing what they do, you know. Right. It was the guys who kind of like were away from that and they got screwed over. They end up looking at that stuff, and that's just kind of who they were. I mean, maybe they weren't 6 foot chisel jaw Chads, but they're sitting here trying to study the behavior patterns, trying to see what works and what doesn't work. And I think now we're following into this illusion where everybody gets to be the quote unquote Chad, which is just like, no, this isn't the case. But what you do need is a good understanding of the layout, the landscape, the way the system works, so you can at least avoid the pitfalls as you're dealing with this, with whoever you are as a genuine person. You know what I mean? So I do appreciate the improvement advice, but I think it sort of trails over into something that's kind of unattainable or almost like a shaming language, which I think is not helpful, you know, where I think a lot of that frustration can be channeled into, hey, like these are what the laws are. We should be paying attention to this. This is what's really affecting why marriages are going downhill, or why guys are getting trapped in paternity fraud and stuff like this. This is something at least all guys can come together and be like, hey, these are the specific things we take issue with. These are the specific things we want to see change and why. And then at least get that energy concentrated into the point of a spear that we can just throw and then hopefully make some change. You know, I'm kind of ranting here, but my sort of opinions of humans is that most humans, except maybe for some very special people, will try to get away with what they can get away with what the law allows them to get away with. Like even in the rules of a game, people are right up there to the edge of the rules to get whatever little advantage over everyone else they can, you know. And we can sit here and we can blame women, or we can blame guys who aren't high value, or whatever it is. But really the issue is the laws are allowing people to get right up here to a point that I think is too far gone. And the laws need to be adjusted to reset some of the parameters to make these institutions work again, you know, like marriage and other things. So that's part of the challenge. That's kind of the stuff I'm into and I think about on a day-to-day basis. Yeah.
Yeah, those are all really good points. When you mentioned marriage and you know, child support and all this stuff, I was thinking about, you know, what they refer to as the sexual market value or sexual marketplace value with the red pill and the manosphere. And you know, one of the things that, or the way it works for those of you who aren't familiar with, and correct me if I'm wrong, Shah, but basically as women get closer to that, you know, that golden year of 35, you know, they're more likely to try to lock some down so they can have kids, because, you know, as science has proven, it gets riskier for women to have kids after 35, but whereas men are basically seen for their financial resources, because, you know, when a woman wants to have babies, kids, you know, she wants a financially stable man. So like as a man gets older, then they're their value goes up to a woman. So do you think that a lot of go ahead?
No, I'm sorry. Well, what you're saying there, a lot of that's true, and it is true. I mean, and that's what you see. And like as women start hitting that early to mid 30s point, and men are in that same point,
intersects.
They're sort of market values intersecting there, and the guys are kind of going up. Men will still probably sleep with that woman, but their marriage market value is starting to go down lower, and so that's around the time where they're probably going to try to lock someone down, and you do see that, and especially.
And do you think that's where men get into trouble because the woman tries to, not convince them, but like.
Well, no. Well, let me. So that is where they get in trouble, and because especially if you're a guy who hasn't had much luck until that point, and now you're starting to come into who you are, you're seeing a woman who's kind of cresting her peak. And she finds you, and then she locks you down before you get to avail yourself of a lot of the same advantages maybe they had when they were younger. But what happens is what I'd see in child support, I'd see a lot of guys kind of living lives that they're struggling to find meaning in. We live in this world where religion's kind of taken a back seat. A lot of the things we held sacred aren't sacred, or they aren't seen as sacred anymore, and people are struggling to find meaning in their lives. That's where all the depression is. So they find one person that shows them attention, and that they're like, wow, like they're in love. This is great. This is the best.
They like me. They really, really like me.
Yeah, this happens to all guys. I mean, especially with your first. Well, I mean, this happened to me at 30, and then I had to swallow that pill, even though I had been reading Red Pill for years. I still didn't understand because I didn't deal with those visceral emotions of living through something like that. But that's where a guy is vulnerable to get locked down, because now the first person that comes and kind of floods them with the good stuff, they're very likely to make those decisions. I'm glad things ended between me and whoever I was seeing back then, because I would have been dumb enough to go all the way with that person, and that person was a disaster. That's a different story, but that's definitely true, and there's basically like the sexual marketplace, then there's the marriage marketplace, or relationships, you can say, so it's interesting how that works. I think what you're kind of referencing a little bit is the dual mating strategy, which some scientists say is true, some say it isn't true, but it's basically what the red pill guys back in the days would call, alpha F's, beta bucks, right?
Right.
So there's like your Chad guys who are like the alpha dudes, and then there's your beta Billy who, right when they're around that time, they get locked down to be the provisioner, and the provider. And that typically means, if a divorce happens, they also get the raw end of the deal there if they're the one who are provisioning most of the resources, right? And then if those kids are actually, Alpha Chad's kids past the age of 2, Beta Billy's still stuck on the hook for that, right? So that's how you get the nightmare stories that we've all read so much about,
right?
So
Roy commented, he said his marriage is pointless, no benefits to getting married. What are your thoughts on that?
And like the part of me that wants to be high and mighty doesn't want to agree with Roy, but when Roy says that, it is largely true for the most part here, especially where we're living. Right. The original benefits of marriage, like when you think about them, it's to have a family unit. You guys all have one last name. I'm going to the Johnson's house tonight. I'm going to the Lopez house tonight. And it's a family. It's beautiful.
None of the hyphenated BS.
Well, I ran into that so much at child support. I don't want to derail this, but if you have a child and his name's Tyler Johnson Jackson, because he's got mom's last name too, or whatever. And then he meets Alice, Lopez, what's
Sanchez.
Another last name? Sanchez. What are they going to name their kid? Is that kid going to have 4 last names? Like, they start coming up with. But anyways, back to marriage. And it's supposed to be this deal where you work hard, you have your children, and you're in a unit, and you're actually able to not just have genetic kids, but you're able to pass down your values to these kids. You know what I mean? And that is supposed to be the benefits of marriage. As we're seeing it play out now, these marriages aren't lasting. The families get ripped apart. If you're lucky to have some custody, maybe you have 50% custody. If you don't, they're jumping from guy to guy. Maybe they find someone else who's actually imparting the values that you want to pass on to your kids. If you're not able to see them, you know what I mean? If you're the higher earner, then marriage is definitely going to get you. It's better to just have like a religious ritual where you two come together in the eyes of God than signing it and getting the state involved. At least from the state aspect, especially, it's a raw deal. Unless like you're gonna marry someone that she's making more than you, or you guys are both making the same amount. The cleanest divorces I've ever seen, people were making around the same amount, so they were more likely to be like, hey, what's yours is yours, what's mine is mine. Let's just call it even. No spousal, no this. It's just that doesn't happen all the time because people are trying to leverage what they can get. Women typically want someone that's going to be a provider, as is kind of biologically ingrained in them because they have to put in a lot of investment to have kids, with getting pregnant, being out of the game for a while, taking care of the kids in their infancy, at least traditionally speaking. You know what I mean? So it's like when Roy says, yeah, there's no benefits to marriage. I mean, as the system is now, he's right. I think what it was originally intended to be, it's supposed to be a good thing, So that's how I feel about it,
Well, Tony says biblical marriage and unrivaled benefits. I mean, everyone's gonna. I'm not saying Tony's wrong. I'm just saying everyone's gonna support whatever they believe is best for them.
Yeah, and I get it, and that's going to be the TradCon perspective. Not to box it into something, but humans have kind of dealt with these same problems before, and marriage was looked at as a good thing. You know what I mean? Marriage was important too because. Property rights, right? Inheritance. If you can't prove someone was the father of somebody, and how are they going to pass on inheritance to who, unless they just choose someone at random or whatever? But if something happens, someone dies, you can say, hey, this person is the heir of this person.
Right.
And if you don't mind, I'd like to go on another history rant, maybe for your viewers.
Yeah, please do.
But, so when we look at paternity, back then it was not easy to establish paternity. Especially in the 50s, right? Like 60s and even 70s, you actually had to, if there was a child born out of wedlock, and which back then only 3 to 5% of kids were, because people understood, hey, if I have a kid out of wedlock, that child is illegitimate or a bastard or bastardette. I don't know if there's a woman term for that, but so people would be more likely inclined to actually get married and keep that family together, have the kid within the marriage. There was huge incentive to do that. And the reason that is because if a divorce happened and you're married, you're going to go to the court to get the divorce. So the divorce is going to hear all these issues and they're going to decide on them. But if you have a kid outside of marriage back then, it would be very hard to prove someone is the dad because there's no genetic tests back then. The only way they can really prove, you have to have witnesses. There'd be a courtroom full of people saying, hey, this guy actually was holding out to be the dad. This person would actually have to hold out to be the dad. There'd have to be witnesses saying, hey, these people were together. They actually did do it with each other and all these things. Then what happened is you start moving into, I think, the 70s and the 80s, and you have blood tests now. Blood tests were okay, but typically they can only be relied upon to say this person is not the child's father. It couldn't really point at this exact person. If someone was like matching types, then it still required a lot of circumstantial evidence for the court to be able to assign legal paternity. Then something happened in the 90s that was like a freaking nuclear bomb in this technology. We got cheap and easy DNA genetic tests. Mm-hmm. So, and at the same time, we got huge.
Don't forget about contraceptives, the availability of contraceptives.
Yeah, and that's another thing that changes the culture, which goes into the dating apps and all that. But basically, what happens in the 90s is you also have welfare reform. I think it was 95 or 96, and then you have the child support program, which was established in 75, gets a huge overhaul, and it gets all this power, and it basically changes the game from saying, hey, someone has to have a relationship with the child to be able to establish them the father. It says you can also establish someone as legal father if they're biologically the father, just with the test, even if they've never seen the kid before. So basically, you kind of end up with this system that it then changes from courts, really looking at stuff, seeing what's going on, and to just being able to get someone, which is fine. If someone's the bio dad, then I think they should take care of that child. But then mixed with the 2-year law, that creates problems. And I kind of forgot what our original point was from the question you asked me, but I wanted to give that history there because this is how you end up with issues of like people who are paying child support, but they don't have custody, and they're like, how come you're taking money from me, but you don't care if I have custody? It's because custody was originally something that private family law dealt with. It had nothing to do with the public system or anything. The public only cared about getting the money back. So going back into benefits of marriage and stuff like that's what it was from a person's question. Marriage had all these benefits to say, hey, this person was the legal father. this person has the rights to my property or this or that, right? Now you can become the legal father without having to get married, because you can sign paperwork at the hospital, which didn't exist back then. It's called a voluntary declaration of paternity. Or, you can go through the child support system and they can establish a judgment for you, or you guys can just use those laws to become the father. So when the other person, Roy, I think, says marriage has no benefits, he's kind of right, because you can actually circumvent marriage now and become a voluntary declaration of paternity at the hospital. If you sign that, has the same weight of a legal finding of paternity. So what's the point of getting married if you can still establish yourself as the father through these other routes, and then not have to take the chance of actually getting, divorce screwed over? So it's just kind of this weird thing where the system kind of turns over on itself, and it's very interesting once you really get into the nitty gritty of it.
Yeah, definitely mentioned custody, and that's another topic that I wanted to touch on, because I have a lot of male friends who had kids, whether they're married or wedlock, whatever, and they got divorced or split up, whatever, and they're not able to see their kids because they've proven that they're a really good father, but it's gotten to the point where they have to prove that the mother's like literally mentally or physically incapable of raising their children just for them to have some custody.
Yeah. And the reason for that is because they now have to go hire a private family law lawyer, or they got to figure out how to file all these forms. They got to pay a fee to the court to hear all this stuff, versus child support, which is a free, the tax dollars pay for it, but it's a free system someone could just walk into, and then the state pays for everything, right? Through the taxpayers. Versus custody should be something that, something that should be a part of that. So at least like fathers who can't afford that can at least get an order to be able to do that. But then there's all kinds of problems with like parental alienation. You might have an order, but maybe the cops aren't enforcing it because they're too busy, or there's all these different games you got to go through. I mean, I have heard so much from guys who wanted to see their kids and they weren't able to. Let me get into my second smaller axe that I want to grind. The first one was that paternity 2-year rule. The other things I should be changed. Okay, let me ask you something, John. How much, like, if you're in California, let's say where you're at, what do you think is the max amount? Like, just think of all the expenses it takes to raise a typical kid, whether it's a teenager or a 5-year-old, whatever age you want to. What do you think is be really liberal with the amount to? Like, how much do you think you need to raise a kid for monthly expenses? And that includes transportation, health, food, clothing, all that stuff. We're in your jurisdiction, where you live at.
How old is the child?
Let's say a 10-year-old, whatever age you want it to be.
Okay.
Whatever the most expensive time you think it is.
I don't know. I don't have kids, but I'm going to guess like probably $2,000 at least.
$2,000. Well, it's funny. I was speaking with someone else who does have kids and also understands the system, and he said $2,000 also. He said $1,000, but then I was like, let's just take it to $2,000.
$1,000's pretty conservative.
Well, yeah, sure. So $2,000 a month as one kid's expenses, and this isn't including mom or the other parent taking care of themselves. Now, let me ask you something. If it's typically about $2,000 to take care of a kid, why should there ever be a child support order that's like $12,000 a month or $20,000 a month? Or there was one, I think Adam Carolla was like $50,000 a month or whatever it is. Why?
Yeah, I think Dr. Dre was in the recent news too.
Yeah. I mean, you see those high-profile cases. I used to work at the agency, so I saw cases that weren't high-profile that were still significantly large. And what I'm trying to say is I think there should be caps on both child and spousal support. Okay, because I think if economists look at typical areas, look at cost of living, they can make a determination like, hey, this is probably the max amount of child support we need for this area. You know what I mean? And the reason I say that is because you have someone, they get with the provider. This person decides to leave the provider. And right now, what the law will do will take what this guy has and still provide the same lifestyle to this person. What I'm saying is this person intentionally wants to leave the provider, which is fine. It's within their right to do that. But they should only be given a max cap amount of what's the minimum for like, not being in poverty, or even a normal middle class. $2,000 a month would take you there, right? And what I think this would change is it would actually help facilitate the party who's holding custody to actually facilitate a relationship with the provider. Because if they know the provider can provide more, and give more to this child instead of whatever the cap is, they will actually be more incentivized to help facilitate a relationship with whoever is going to actually provide more. The father or whoever can then have some more say into like, hey, you know, this is what I believe. These are the values I want to impart to you. You won't get more from me because these are the rules under my house and my conditions. They'll get them, you know, whatever the capped amount is, which is enough if they want to walk away. But I think it would actually help solve some of these custody issues, because then the other party, instead of being able to walk away with the cash and prizes and then get to do whatever they want, unaccounted for, right? It's not like anybody's seeing what the child support spent on. You know what I mean? There's no governing body that's like, hey, what did you spend the $129,000 this month, Kevin Costner's ex-wife? What did you spend, you know, or the $12,000 if you're normal, you know, whatever it is. So
I agree with you, but do you think that by putting a cap on it, that's the government saying, like, oh, this is how you should treat your kid, but based on $2,000? Do you think that's the reason why they don't put it?
Well, I think, you know, when you say treat your kid, do you
I'm sorry, raise, not treat. Raise, like, this is how you should raise your kid.
Well, I mean, if they're in the household with you, then of course it's however you see fit and whatever the situation is, you know what I mean? And that cap is pretty high. Typical child support probably like $600 a month or something like that, right? So I don't think it would change a lot of that for most people. But what I think it would do is, and that's an adjustable amount too, right? It'll be based off of what economists and data that we have in local areas, which we can get, would say is appropriate. So I think you're saying that the government in some oppressive way would saying that all you have to do is give your kid this amount of money or something like that.
Or you can't spend more than that. Like, oh, you can only raise your kid on $2,000 a month. When, you know, people like Dr. Dre and Kevin Costner are like, hey, I have all the money. Why do I need to stop at $2,000?
Well, see, yeah, and that's the thing I'm trying to say is that it's gonna give them back some power to be able to say, hey, listen, we can provide more, but you're my son. I want to provide more. I love you. I have a relationship with you, or daughter, doesn't matter. But if you're in a situation where mom takes the kid away, you can't see the kid. I'm not saying this happened to Kevin Costner. This happens to a lot of other men, though. Right. You can't see the kid at all. If you just give the minimum, at least there's some incentive to get them to say to communicate with you. The alternative, which is what happens now, is that they get all the money and they still don't communicate with you because they don't need to. You know what I mean? And I'm open to the ideas being refined or thought of better, but I think there should be caps on spousal and child support, definitely. You know, and especially spousal support, because it's like, I'll give you the argument, like for like child support, like this is what their legal team told me. Like this is what we were told. We were told that, you know, if you imagine like one house, right? Mom and dad live in there, the kid lives in there, the house has a certain amount of income for whoever's providing or whatever it is. The house splits up into two households and the kid goes back and forth between dad's house and mom's house. They would say that amount is appropriate because they want to maintain the lifestyle between dad's house and mom's house for the child. That's how it's generally argued. You know what I'm saying? I'm saying people are willingly incentivized to walk away from marriages, and that we should curtail this a little bit by saying the lifestyle that is so attractive for these very well-to-do, high-value people is still over here. You're over here with the minimum that still lets you get a 2-bedroom apartment, you know, and probably not the best part of town, but hey, it's better than living on the streets, and it's actually appropriate. It's what most of us live by anyways, if you're the average person. But you don't get to take the lifestyle with you. You know what I mean? And that's a lot of, you know, things that guys complain about today with the divorce rape and stuff. But that's my smaller axe to grind. You know, I can live without that one. For me, the paternity is usually the more egregious one. But you know, this helps women too. As they start making more money, this will at least open them up to being able to marry or tie the knot with someone who might not make as much money as they do. Maybe they aren't a pharmacist who makes, you know, 180 grand. Maybe they work a normal job and they make $65K a year, and then the lady makes 90 something K a year with her master's degree or whatever it is. At least, I think it helps both genders in that way, you know, because I think as this starts to disproportionately affect women more, they're going to become way more conscious of this and be like, that's not right. You know, I mean, I've seen women paying spousal support. I've seen women paying child support. So, you know, it doesn't even change the amount for most people of what you're typically going to get. I just think putting the caps on it will will help even out the dating market a little bit, because it might end some of these like sort of targeted marriages where all these ladies want to marry some guy who's like an NBA player, this or that. And I get it. It's like guys want supermodels or something. But if they know the capped, there's a capped amount, and that word cap sounds like I'm saying a small number, but that can still be up to like $2,000 a month for child support plus another like $3,000 a month for spousal support. That's $5,000 a month with them not doing anything. You know what I mean? Right. Not working or anything. So then they're going to be like, well, how worth it is this relationship to me? This person is a good provider. I'm more incentivized to stay. And you know what I mean? If I leave, I think it helps with the custody issues also. But custody is a big thing. And the big problem with custody is that it's encapsulated in what's still private family law. It was never put into the public family law sphere. So the child support agency doesn't even have power to issue a custody order. Only in Sacramento, the way it works is there's two courts in family law. There's family support court, which is the child support court. Then there's family law court, which was like down the hall, and they dealt with divorces and they can issue custody orders. The family support court couldn't. So you end up ensnared in this child support system. We only cared about custody when we were doing the calculation for child support. And if someone had a custody order that said they should have 50-50, but mom wasn't letting him see the kid, and mom's like, hey, the kid's here 100% of the time, and dad comes in and unknowingly admits to me that, yeah, I haven't seen the kid because mom won't let me, the way I was trained to hear is, okay, put mom has 100% custody with the kid, and they would end up paying more. So wow. It's just like this very weird thing. Yeah.
Tony he shared his experiences, and thanks for sharing, Tony. He said, I have a child from a non-marriage before I met my wife that I wasn't made aware of until he was 2. Then mom disappeared with him until I was able to find her when he was 9, and I was never able to get any rights to being his father, although I fought for the right with close to $100K in court and attorney and therapy fees. I was definitely alienated and erased out of my bio son's life. And unfortunately, this happens to a lot of men.
It does happen to a lot of guys, and it's like the laws are written that you should be able to establish paternity, even though the kid's over 2. So if the kid doesn't have a father, then they should still be able to establish paternity for you. Some of the stuff he probably ran into was not knowing where they were, trying to find out who to serve, what address to send the process server to. She probably kept finding ways to duck and dodge him. Or what could have happened was she found some other guy that maybe took on paternity of the kid. Who knows? Maybe she had some story like the father's never been in his life, doesn't care about the kid. Maybe she got married to someone else, and then that kid's like, all right, or that guy's like, I'll adopt this kid. And then the state's not even aware of him asking to be the father. And then by the time they establish paternity at that point, it's very hard for you to get in there and say, hey, wait, no, I'm really the dad. You got to undo what you did. If you can't prove you had a relationship with the kid either. So stuff like that does happen. And fathers do want relationships with their kids, you know what I mean? And they get caught up in the system. So that's the other side of the coin right there. So I do appreciate him sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. And I guess like one of the last things that I wanted to cover today, by the way, this has been a really good conversation. I got to have you on again. We can talk about this all day.
Yeah.
But one of the last things I want to talk about today is that do you think that like in a way society, I don't know if it's intentional or unintentional, but do you think there's a society that they're lying to men and women because women are being told, go be a boss bitch, get your own career and all this stuff, which isn't a bad thing, but at the same time, it's putting a strain on marriages. And, as time goes, we're seeing more and more studies that, kids who grow up in a nuclear family where the mother and the father is present, they have, a better life, essentially a better career. Do you think, there's some aspect to that?
For sure. I mean, it's definitely something that's being sold to both genders, and women too, specifically being the boss babe thing, putting off marriage, going out there, and I understand.
And putting off having kids too, and when they realize it, they're in their mid-30s.
Yeah, I mean, being a mother isn't really like putting off kids till their mid-30s. Then they end up with the in vitro, or it's really tough, or they're in competition with younger women and all this kind of stuff. I definitely think that they're being sold that. I mean, if you look at what marriage, I think in the 50s or so, people used to get married in their early 20s. I think it was like 20 for women or 23 for men, or even, I think it was even younger. And nowadays, average age has gone up to like, I think 27 for women, around 30-ish for men. And marriage used to be this thing where like two people come together. And this guy probably wasn't a high value man if he's 20 or 23, because I mean, how much could you have done by that time? But you guys both came and you guys built a life together. You know what I mean? You guys You guys come when you're young and you build. Nowadays, marriage, people are getting married later. It's kind of like, hey, I did everything I wanted to. Now I got my career in this. Let's get married now, as a kind of like capstone to a life we've already lived or something like that.
And they're on a time crunch because she's got to have kids before 35.
They're on a time crunch, yeah, because there's biological constraints, and then, you know, there's definitely a lot of women out there that will say the strong and independent sort of catchphrase when they're young, and then somehow as they're older, all of a sudden they're a traditional woman, and they'll start making all the right noises to get a guy to get married to them. But the culture definitely, the media definitely feeds into that. I don't know if it's a you know, done on purpose, or if that's what's selling. So that's what they keep selling. You know what I mean? That's what they keep producing because people keep buying into that. You know. And
Roy says feminism was killing women's future in this country. I wouldn't say it's killing, but it's not helping. That's for sure.
Well, yeah. Well, see, and feminism is one of those things. It's one of those terms that have definitely kind of changed meaning as it's happened, right? I mean, it started with voting rights, wanting bank accounts, this and kind of thing, and then it became,
which I'm sure we're both all for. You know, we're all for rights. And,
I'm for that and everything. And then I think it became what they call, I might be wrong, third wave feminism, which is more into this boss babe stuff and what we're seeing now. But, you know, it's like the genie's out of the bottle, cat's out of the bag. We can't exactly go back to how it was traditionally because technology has changed, right? You brought up the contraceptives earlier,
right?
And all this kind of stuff, and certain biological limitations that were on women, as well as legal limitations, aren't there anymore. I mean, a woman can be on birth control and still participate in sex and all this stuff, and not have to worry about getting pregnant. It used to be, I mean, if you get pregnant, I mean, you're pregnant for 9 months, that guy is gone. People kind of probably understood more. You got to be way more careful about this, you know?
Right.
And so with the technology change, I feel like we can't really hit the rewind button on that kind of stuff. So that's why, like, I'm trying to propose certain changes to what I think can help the situation we're in now, because the cat's out of the bag. We can't really go back. We have to accommodate the new technologies that are here now, you know, and that includes the DNA test and all that kind of stuff. And the laws need to understand. The laws need to be formulated in a way that accommodates these changes. You know, I don't know what the future looks like. I mean, obviously nobody does, but you see, you know, what used to be more like individual stuff kind of moving towards a collective. So here's another point about child support. And it kind of brings up a larger philosophical concern of who's responsible for kids. Is it the individual or is it the collective? So back then, when these single mother when these out of wedlock births were starting to balloon out of control and we're hitting 24 to 25% of kids in the 70s, Congress is trying to figure out what to do. There's the individual, let's go after the deadbeat dad individual responsibilities on the one side. And then there's like, well, let's expand the welfare program on the other side, right? So you had these, there was what was called the Sugarman proposal, and then Garfinkel, which was very same, Erwin Garfinkel. And basically what they suggested is that we expand the Social Security program, and that everybody from their check, basically guys, would pay into, will have another Social Security tax on them that was specifically as an insurance for if they impregnated someone and became, you know, a dad out of wedlock, right? Because then that mom can go and apply to that specific Social Security program, and they'd be able to get funds for their child that way. And the philosophy behind that was saying, hey, this is kind of a collective thing where the tribe takes care of the kids versus the individual. The way society went was, let's go after the individual dad. But in the background, there's always been this kind of collective thing, because welfare, the way the program started evolving, was kind of a like, hey, we're all being taxed to take care of kids that aren't ours, right? And we're kind of going that way now. So here's something that I actually just found out about. The way child support kind of breaks down is there's child support that has to be paid back to cash aid or welfare, and then there's child support that's owed to the other parent. So if mom has a kid and is a single parent and is not on welfare, and there's a child support order, the money gets paid to mom because she's owed the money. If the mom is receiving welfare, the amount we get from child support gets first paid back to the state, and if there's some left over, then that goes to mom, right? So, and that's how traditionally child support was made. It was made to recoup the welfare dollars, right? And then they started advertising to people who weren't on welfare, because the idea was, well, if we're proactive about this, it'll stop these people from going on welfare in the first place. But California, I think this is going into effect next year. they're actually going to change it so the money that's owed to the state actually still goes to the mom. So in effect, what this is doing is it's kind of changing the original spirit of the child support program, not to pay back the taxpayers, but the mom will be able to get the taxpayer money from welfare and also double dip and get the child support money from dad. So that's starting to bring up these debates about, well, hey, this is kind of putting that burden on everybody else when shouldn't it be on the parents themselves? And then when you start looking at relationships, we're starting to see a de facto polyamory. People might not label themselves as that, but how many people are in situationships and you don't know, they might be sleeping with other people.
Entanglements.
Yeah, entanglements. And if this progresses into the future, 50 years from now, 100 years from now, if it becomes this kind of polyamorous blob, you're going to end up with a system that's more about, hey, everybody needs to take care of these kids. That's more welfare, Social Security based. And it's kind of funny because it brings us into, I guess, those kind of same talking points people were talking about in the 70s and the 60s when this started becoming an issue. So, it goes down to who we are as a society, what our values are. Americans tend to value freedom, individual responsibility, being able to have the opportunity to do stuff for yourself. But of course, there's a contingent of society that would like to see things more socialism based, or I don't right or wrong for whatever. It's just these are the ideas of our time,
right?
And you see how child support plays into this and to how it affects our lives on a day-to-day basis. So, I mean, it could be this thing where if there's a collective thing, I mean, as you see with, first it was widows who needed the welfare, then that opened up a little groove for women who wanted to have kids out of wedlock to be like, hey, there's an option here to at least get money. And then that ties into what feminism, women entering the workforce, birth control, all these things start playing on themselves until you get this huge tornado or snowball that's led us to where we're going and where we're about to be as this continues. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Definitely.
Ignore.
No, it's okay. You shared so much good information. I was going to say that we're going to start wrapping up here, folks. So if you have any questions for myself or Shah, please put them in the chat. So basically, Shah, if anyone's watching this, maybe they're in their 20s and 30s, maybe they feel like they're down on their luck. They're not having any success on the dating apps. Is there any advice that you would give to them?
Man, I would definitely say and I was one of those guys in my 20s that wasn't having any luck. I went through very dark periods where I felt like, hey, maybe I just wasn't good enough. And there was all these kinds of things. And it was a very, very tough crawl out of that dark hole, And I almost have a survivor's guilt with that too. Like, I mean, when I'm with women now or whoever even I'm with, and I get to experience these things that I've wanted to, and I think about all the guys that are still there because I was one of them, you know what I mean? And I mean, as far as advice, I hate to fall back on the improvement stuff, but you have to break out of your shell. You have to face your insecurities. You have to keep trying to talk to people, and you have to face rejection and uncertainty over and over again, and keep having the will and the motivation and the courage to try new things, trying to rebrand yourself. You know what I mean? How you talk to yourself, getting a new haircut, dressing differently, seeing what worked, what didn't work. And don't be afraid to hang out with other men that are also successful. I mean, forget just talking to women, talk to anybody you can. I mean, I'm the product of not just me figuring this out. I couldn't not do it by myself. I have a good tribe of guys around me in my life that have given me pointers. I mean, with that first chick that went south with when it's funny, I actually didn't get the dating apps until after COVID. So after March 2020 happened, my birthday was in April, and then in May of 2020, I actually got on my first dating app because I was like, we were all stuck inside, and I'm like, man, it's weird. COVID was sort of the thing that pushed me over the point to start getting out there. It's kind of funny, right. But I made so many mistakes, and what I could advise is it's okay to make mistakes. Try to avoid the ones that are going to screw you over for life. You know what I mean? Ending up in a baby trap, ending up in the child support system, and then not being able to have a passport because you got this huge child support debt, or having your license suspended, or having your bank accounts levied, or having all your business licenses and stuff suspended because they want you to pay, but you don't have the money to pay. You know what I mean? Ending up in jail, God forbid, or some kind of horrible situation like that. If you can avoid those are very big things, and they're relatively easy to avoid if you're aware of them. Not about easy, but you can. And it's about becoming more active, standing up for yourself, and going after what you want. But find a tribe of guys, those are the guys you can talk to about having trouble in your life. I don't want to complain about that stuff to women. It just doesn't work. They don't want to hear it. They're not attracted to that, in my experience. And it's just like having your brothers that you can lock arms with when the freaking river is going too fast is what's going to help you survive out there. And don't be afraid to go and try and keep trying. That's all I can say. And for me, it's a continual process of keep trying. Things don't work out. Things work out. I'm constantly on here negotiating with people. I got this saying I always tell myself, always be negotiating, whether it's in business or with women or whatever.
And I think it's the Pakistani in you.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like, can I get that for $5 instead of 10? But yeah, so I'm constantly doing that. And you got to talk to multiple people until someone's gonna give you the commitment that you want, if that is what you want. You know what I mean? And if you're only talking to one person and it all goes downhill, it's gonna suck. But you have to throw a wide net in the way it is today. So I believe in each and every one of you, no matter what. And there is a way, there is a thread that leads out of the Minotaur's labyrinth. I believe that. John, if you don't mind, I can, if you guys want child support tips, I do child support shorts on my YouTube channel and also my TikTok, but if you want
to put your link below.
Oh yeah, I appreciate that.
Yeah, anytime.
So I talk about other stuff too that I find funny to react to, because YouTube is kind of an outlet for me. It's a nice place to blow off steam. You got to go out in society, be around. Sometimes people annoy me. Maybe I'll make a reaction video about that. But I also have been starting to do a lot more child support related content, because I know people want to see that. So I do child support tips. Those are my shorts and they're my TikToks. So I try to impart a little bit of child support jewels and nuggets here and there, so it's easier for guys to consume. And, then we can do long forms and have discussions like this.
Yeah, definitely. Again, really solid advice, and 100% agree with the advice you gave me, because I was in a similar position. When I was in my 20s, I didn't really understand who I was or what I was good at and where I belonged. And like you said, women don't care about men's problems, even though there's whole spiel about like, oh, be vulnerable, tell us about your depression problems. That's a turn off to women. They don't care. To them, when you open to them, they see you as a weak man, someone that they can't really trust and have kids with.
Yeah, and it's not to, and it's not even like, when I say that, I don't mean that in a way to like throw shade at women or say they don't care or they're some horrible people or anything like that.
It's biological.
It's biological. It's just the way women are attracted to men is different. It's funny. I think of like Amber Heard, and Amber Heard is like very extreme on the other end. But I actually did a video on this, but she revealed something that a lot of women are thinking, but that most of them won't say, because it just wouldn't look good to say it. When she was on the stand and Johnny Depp was there and she was getting cross-examined or whatever, she started talking about one night where I can't remember what happened to Johnny Depp. Someone passed away or something. And she was like, and he started crying. And I'm just seeing a grown man cry. Like, she was so disgusted by it. And then it's ironic because shortly thereafter, she starts crying on the stand, and there's no problem with that. but it revealed that like women will be there to listen to you, but that is very different from cultivating the attraction with them. And when it comes down to sharing those emotions, I mean, that's stuff like, typically guys aren't known for showing their emotions, but if dealing with stuff, it's much easier to talk to my buddies, like my buddy Mark I have on my channel sometimes. Like, we talk about the relationship stuff. I talk about that kind of stuff. Like when I was going through it with some other chick, like with my tribe of guys, and my buddy was like, he's trying to explain the game to me. You know what I mean? He's like, this is what happened. This is where you messed up. This is what you need to do differently next time. And I'm, and it helps to make someone into a better man that way, So.
Yeah, definitely. It's same. I was in the same position as you, or very similar, growing up in my 20s, trying to figure out, who I was and all this stuff. And, like you guys, I allowed dark times, but, I knew that the only way to get out was to keep putting in effort. So I lost weight. I dressed better. Basically I just like figure out all these ways where I could improve. And, I was able to crawl out of that hole. So, if you're a man in your 20s or your 30s right now, if you're in that, dark hole that myself and Shah, where you can definitely get out of it, just put in the work, and then, things will start looking up for you.
Yeah. And it's amazing. It is a big journey, John, like, I think you probably would agree with this too, but like, especially when I was young and blind in those ways, more so than I am now, like getting laid or whatever is just one aspect of dealing with women. Then there's the whole emotional aspect and relationships, and
where
then
do we
there's
stand?
legal stuff. Yeah, exactly. So you might think, like, I remember when I got my first kiss, man, I was freaking zooming, dude. I drove home on top of the world, like all those experiences and even leading to like with my first time with the woman, it's just like it developed this confidence in me that even if I don't have anything, that confidence is still there because I've had these experiences, which have helped to make me who I am today. Like, I know those anxieties aren't really there the same way they were. I mean, a lot of guys are dealing with an overwhelming anxiety, and the only way out of that is to confront it, Right. And because I remember what that was. Now it's like, man, it's not like a big deal to go meet up some chick for a date or to even holler at them or this or that. It's just like, I don't know. I've gotten to this point where it's just second nature, for a lot of that stuff. And it's great. And it's still a work in progress for me. It's only been a few years for me. So, but when I hear guys like out there, I really sympathize with the man. And I really don't appreciate people who will just like write off the pain they're going through and be like, hey, this is an incel or whatever.
Right.
Because I really believe those people just don't understand what these other people are going through. They've never been there. Maybe they were lucky enough to have people throughout their life, and good for them. That's the way it should be. But to point the finger and be like, oh, you're just that, or you're just that, or your suffering doesn't matter is incredibly short-sighted, and it's really mean and messed up. Those guys need mentors, people that they can rely on and look up to, and shaming them is pushing them in a direction that can be dangerous. That's how you get some of these dangerous acts out here from lost men. So,
yeah, I agree. Any last thoughts, or any final thoughts, Shah?
I
other than the ones you've already provided.
Yeah, I don't know if I have anything else profound to share. I think for me, it's a pleasure to be able to kind of look at the culture we have and see how it's evolving and what it's becoming and trying to understand it. I think we're at a point in history where a lot of this stuff is new, and we have to keep trying to adapt and find our way to be able to survive in this, but I want to believe there's a way, so I'll be here watching and commentating on it as much as I can and living it as much as I can. But I appreciate everyone who's watched this today, and I had a fun time. So hope you enjoyed it too, John.
Yeah, I definitely did. We definitely got to do this again. And I also put the link to Shah's YouTube channel in the chat, and it's also in the description. I definitely recommend checking out and consider subscribing to his channel. Really good content. If you liked what you saw today, you're gonna get a lot more of it on his channel. So, Shah, thanks again for doing this. Thanks for coming on this beautiful day in California. And thanks to everyone who watched. Thanks for commenting. If you guys enjoyed this video, definitely give it a thumbs up. Really helps out with the algorithm. And we'll catch you guys next one. Peace.
Take it easy, y'all. You guys have a good day.